Speaking of Mr. Gallegos, can you critique the job he's done as District Attorney?
Well, rather than critique the job that he's done, I'd rather say what I would do differently, and that's that I would not handle plea bargains as kind of a way of life for the office. I think that things need to be handled very differently. I think the staff needs to have hands-on training. I think that if you know what you're doing and you inspire people to do it well and you give them everything that they need and they know what their standards are, you hold them to it and they will perform well. Right now that is not the situation in the courtrooms, it's not the situation from the eyes of law enforcement, and it's definitely not the situation from the eyes of various people who have been either victims or families or friends of victims. I think a high value needs to be placed on how you treat people who are in the system, and I think you must be scrupulously ethical in how you handle your cases and your victims, and never, ever prosecute anything for political reasons.
Sorry, never prosecute anything?
For political reasons.
You mentioned Pluto Bargains, that you wouldn't handle them as a way of life. It seems to me that in most DA's offices across the state, a huge percentage of cases are let out, and that just seems to be a fact of our system. Can you elaborate on what you would do differently and how there wouldn't be a way of life?
Well, there's plea bargaining and then there's plea bargaining, as the phrase goes. It's just all how you do it. My understanding of what's going on now is that many times cases are being pled out to charges that have absolutely no relation to the crime. In the criminal world, oftentimes a given criminal act will have within it what's called a lesser included offense. Like, for instance, a DUI, driving under the influence. Oftentimes people plead to what's called a wet reckless. You are driving recklessly with some degree of alcohol, hence the wet term. And so obviously if you're driving DUI, something that's lower level than that would be a wet reckless. I think the most egregious case that I've heard of is a man who was accused of charged with rape, and he pled to a charge of trespassing. I don't see how in the world the crime of trespassing is at all related to the crime of rape. There's no relationship between the two, and the clear sense that I get is because the deputies in the office are not receiving the type of training and clear direction that they need to have from the top. And that's something that I know how to do. I have broad experience, like I said, in 4 different DA's offices. I've seen a lot of different ways to look at things, and I would give my staff the type of leadership that they need to understand how to properly plea bargain things, according to the values I've talked about earlier.
The City Council in Arcata is set to approve an anti-panhandling ordinance. They already have anti-camping, anti-sitting on the sidewalk laws on the books. Do you see that as a priority for your office to fully prosecute, or do you think plea bargains in that case actually are justified?
Well, that's a little trickier one. That involves, that becomes much more nuanced. That's civil liberties and the ability to appear in public and behave as you will, as long as you're not harming anyone. What we've got here is a level of harassment which is really at the borderline. People don't feel that they're very comfortable walking around in public places like on sidewalks or in shopping areas, and so businesses are starting to suffer and the tone of the community is suffering. So what I really think, and I don't mean to punt on this, but what you have to look at is the circumstances of the case. The police are going to have to learn how to work with the new ordinance, and we're going to have, if that ordinance comes into play, when you charge out a case, you have to look at what are called the elements of the crime and figure out if you have the evidence to prove each and every one of the elements to a jury of 12, because the defendant gets to choose that. So we'd have to see what the ordinance actually looks like, and then the police would have to be well trained to make sure that they give the evidence that could prove that case, all those elements at trial. And then yes, in certain types of situations I'd be willing to do that, and in others not. And again, it all depends on the facts of the case.
I got 2 questions for you. First, the case that you referenced, the man who was charged with rape pled out as trespassing.
Yes.
Do you know the title of that case?
I do not know, but that was told to me by one of the chiefs of police in one of the cities, and I can go back and ask. And if you want to get back to me, I will try to find the answer to that.
And then second, I've read some news reports where you've been quoted as being pretty critical of the Whitmore Flores plea in the Nicole Wheetley case. And I'm curious.
Not me. I mean, I don't think I've spoken out against that. I believe Kathleen Bryson has.
I know Bryson has. I thought that in an article that appeared in Arcata, I believe.
Well, hers and mine are side by side. I mean, they track right down. Go back and take a look again. I did not. I think the problem with that case is very clear now in the public from various sources, including the father of the deceased. But I have not made any public comment about that case in particular.
Okay.
And if I'm wrong, let me know and I'll correct myself.
All right. If I was wrong, I apologize for the confusion.
No, it might have been me too. What else?
District Attorney Gallegos has previously gone on record saying that police review, the kind of police review committee that actually the supervisors voted to set up, isn't necessary because the DA and the grand jury can handle all of that. Do you agree with him, or do you think an independent review process on policies and procedures of local law enforcement is justified outside the DA's office?
Well, the district attorney has what's called independent investigative authority, and he can exercise that through his investigators, and he can either just file charges in court, or the DA can go through the grand jury. The problem is that it leaves it entirely in the hands of the district attorney, and then the public sometimes feels like they have no recourse but through the DA's office, and if they can't get anything done there to their satisfaction, then they're stymied. Whether or not we actually need a police review commission is really up to the public and the Board of Supervisors. I think the main thing is that if such a thing comes into being, we need to be very careful about who we put on it so the people are not placed on it who are zealots in either direction. You'd have to have people who are balanced and will take a balanced view at things, and that's how you get, frankly, any type of good prosecution, is with a balanced approach. And while the commission would not engage in a prosecution, obviously, they would be operating the same type of a vein from a citizen's point of view. So I'm not opposed to it. If the Board of Supervisors wants to do it, what I would really look for is to make sure that the people who are appointed to it have a very even sense of the community and a lot of ability to look inside of things before they make decisions.
Can you address the code enforcement unit controversy that has taken place under Gallegos as to the extent of their powers?
Yes. Is there anything you want to know more specifically, or?
Well, just do you believe that the code enforcement unit, when they were armed and in some people's eyes they were looking for things that were beyond the scope of a usual code enforcement unit, which would normally be building violations, that the allegation was made that they were actually looking for marijuana grows and so forth. Can you address what you think the proper role of the code enforcement unit would be?
Well, I'll first start off with what the proper role of the code enforcement unit would not be, which is to take code enforcement officers to go out to look at a situation that may or may not have code enforcement issues in it, and bring along investigators from some other type of function who want to use the code enforcement unit as a ruse to get in for those other functions. That's entirely improper. And it's my understanding of what happened primarily down in southern Humboldt County that that's what was going on, and people there were very outraged about it. On the other hand, the code enforcement officers are no longer armed, they're no longer sworn peace officers, and they feel themselves at risk if they're not properly protected, and may want to bring along peace officers with them. I don't know that answered you fully.
Yeah.
You want more?
Yeah, that did. Thank you.
Yeah. And if you guys, if you ever think I'm not answering something fully, just ask it again.
Will do.
Yeah, I'm really not into dodging or shuck and jive. I don't.
Paul Hagen squares off against incumbent District Attorney Paul Gallegos, challenger Kathleen Bryson, and challenger Allison Jackson. For more, visit HumboldtSentinel.com or see us on YouTube at youtube.com/HumboldtSentinel.